During the first state visit to Greece by a Chinese leader in 11 years, President Xi Jinping on Monday called for raising the level of China-Greece relations in all aspects. As two of humanity's oldest and most influential civilizations, why is dialogue between them so significant? And as they uphold similar beliefs, can their deepening relations help ease global tensions and uncertainties? And what's been China's role in the Greek economic recovery? To discuss these issues and more, I have here in our Beijing studio Jing Ling, a senior research fellow at the China Institute of International Studies. And from Athens, Yanis Kotsimitis, a columnist at the Greek daily Philalethteros. And from Brussels, Peter Kleppe, head of the Brussels office for Open Europe. That is our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Zhong Shi. Ms. Jing, a pleasure to have you on our program today. Let me start with you. I was presenting our coverage of President Xi's visit to Greece this time, and I felt there was a genuine welcome and a genuine appreciation of cooperation with China in Greece, evident in the speeches by Greek leaders and also in the ambience of the scene at the meetings. Would you say that is what's happening now? How would you characterize the relationship between the two countries at this moment? Is there something significant about the timing of this state visit by President Xi?
Yes, we're talking about the timing. We put it in a broader context. That is, as we have said, the world today is full of uncertainties. And I still remember in this year's Munich Security Conferences, the title has been "Who Will Pick the Pieces?" That means the world is in a very dangerous situation because of the unilateralism, rising protectionism, and the nationalism. So we could see this background when, talking about this time's visit, the president to Greece to send out some messages. We could catch the keywords here that we are working for multilateralism, we are working for open economies, and also we are, they are reinstating the principles of the so-called we should respect the sovereignty of each other and to take up the national core interests into consideration. All of these are actually the basic pillars of a current international order. So that is very important messages jointly sending out by China and the European country. So that's the background.
And it's not just about symbols and the messages both sides are trying to send out. They've also taken opportunity of this trip to sign a number of important cooperation deals, 16 of them, and they cover diverse sectors, everything from agriculture to banking to education, energy, ports, just to name a few of them. What do you think the two sides are trying to do at this moment? Are they trying to expand the scope of their current cooperation? Will economic and trade ties still be the focus in this bilateral relationship?
Of course, when you look at the history of China-Greece relations, we shouldn't forget the background when Chinese COSCO entered into the Piraeus port. You're talking about the difficult background at that time. The Greece economy is in a very, very difficult situation. And the investments from the Western companies are withdrawn from the country, and the country couldn't get the money from the market. So at that time, Chinese COSCO entered in, and I like to use the word revival of the port. That means the port under the COSCO participation that have improved the resilience of the port and brought a lot of jobs and growth to the country. I have the statistics. You could see every year 300 million euros will added to the budget of Greece because of the port, and also 3,000 jobs added to the country. So the cooperation was solidly based on the pragmatic cooperations. So you refer to the 16 agreements signed between China and Greece this time, and also a very wide range of areas, including the financing, agriculture, aviation, especially also about the education and the civilization dialogue. All this to demonstrate to the world that China and Greece with different political systems, different histories, we could have all around cooperations that benefits the common people of the two countries. That's, I think, that very important message.
Absolutely. The key word here being win-win cooperation. And this is a flagship project that both countries have taken a lot of pride in. I'll be circling back to talk more about the Port of Piraeus. But for now, I'm going to turn to Mr. Kleppe in Brussels. Mr. Kleppe, Greek leaders expressed hopes that closer ties between China and Greece would also bring about closer ties with Europe as a whole. In what ways will China's relationship with Greece help with its relations with Europe as a whole?
Well, of course, the closer the economic relationship between Greece and China, the closer the economic ties with the rest of Europe, because of course Greece is only one part in the supply chain that China is trying to boost through that region. Now, fundamentally, indeed, if you look at the Port of Piraeus, this has of course been a great success story, the Chinese investment. The port has grown a lot and is trying to expand as we speak. So what are the concerns, not only at the EU level, but I would say broadly in the West? The concerns, as expressed by US Secretary of State Pompeo, are that countries take loans from China and then fail to pay them back, which then gives China political leverage over these countries. Now that's the claim. To what extent is that the case in practice? It all depends. In some countries, Chinese investment is very, very minimal. In other countries, it's quite considerable. I think at the end of the day, it depends of the countries in particular. Particularly Montenegro, for example, is a European country that apparently, according to some people, has basically been borrowing a little too much from China through an investment project there. So ultimately, this comes down, of course, to the countries in particular. They should be wise not to over leverage themselves, but in itself, to welcome investment from anyone is a great idea, and certainly from one of the leading economic powers of today.
I see. I'm also joined in Athens by Yanis Katsomitis, columnist at the Greek daily Philadelpheros. Mr. Katsomitis, thanks so much for joining us. I want to get your take on how you think Greece has maintained that balance between its relationship with China and its relationship with the EU, and how does the EU view its relationship, Greece's ever close relationship with China?
Well, the relationship with China, between Greece and China, goes back to the early years of 2000. And China, especially COSCO, the export company of China, wanted to make a huge investment in the biggest port of Greece, Piraeus. That investment was a matter of dispute in the Greek political parties for many years, until Greece defaulted on its loans in the early 2010s, and then the investment in Piraeus became imperative for Greece to grow and get foreign investment inside. Well, this investment has been quite successful. There were good relationship with the local labor community. The port has expanded. The Chinese investors are moderately happy about the investment, and this looks like it's a stepping stone for further investments of China and Greece. There hasn't been much dispute between Greece and European Union regarding this specific investment. And I think the overall view in Brussels is, as long as China plays by the European rules and European law, there won't be much trouble in welcoming Chinese investment in Greece. The only sensitive issue I sense in the coming months will be in the implementation of the 5G networks and the framework. That I think the best way to solve that is to have the overall European response to this kind of high technology implementation in the European countries from China.
Mr. Kotsoumitis, I want to get your take on the Port of Piraeus, which has been a flagship project between the two sides as part of the Belt and Road Initiative. Both sides have taken a lot of pride in this project. I wonder why you think this has been a successful case.
Yes. Well, China needed an entry port for its goods, its merchandise into the European Union, into the single market. And the Port of Piraeus is the closest port to the Suez Canal. So it's obvious when you open up a map and you see the Eastern Mediterranean, the closest port for Chinese goods, Chinese shipping towards single market of the EU is the Port of Piraeus. And then there is a land connection between Greece, Southeastern Europe, and then to Central Europe or Eastern Europe. So it makes sense to have Piraeus as the entry space, entry port for Chinese goods, Chinese merchandise towards the European markets.
Let me stay with you for just a minute, Mr. Kotsoumitis. I want to talk about the Belt and Road Initiative, for which the Port of Piraeus is an important part of. Greece was the first EU country to sign the MOU and join the Belt and Road Initiative, and that had a little bit of backlash from the European Union, where critical voices say that this is a geopolitical push by China for global domination. But then we have Greece firmly throwing its support behind the initiative, basically saying, you know, we're going to continue working with China on this initiative, and Greece is set to benefit. What is your take on that?
Well, let's start from this point. Piraeus port is open to everyone. There are goods coming in from other Asian markets as well, not just from China. COSCO is just the operator of the port. So it's not a matter of a monopoly or of oligopoly of Chinese authorities in Piraeus port. So it's a more modern port. It has been modernized. There have been infrastructure investment by COSCO. So everybody can come in and deliver its goods in the Piraeus port. So it's not just an opening space for China, it's an opening space for all countries in Asia and the Middle East to come to Europe through the Port of Piraeus. So as far as Piraeus is concerned, I don't see any risks regarding Chinese domination. The only critical thing I think the fears of Europeans are about if China wants to invest or acquire strategic aspects of European industries,
Okay,
especially high technology and biotechnology.
Gotcha. Mr. Klebe, Brussels has been rather critical and skeptical of the Belt and Road Initiative. Now we see this flagship project, the Port of Piraeus, bearing fruit as an important element of that initiative. What is the EU's take on the Belt and Road Initiative and Greece's support behind the initiative?
Well, the EU is basically saying that it's not normal if in the European Union governments cannot subsidize industry players and thereby endanger fair competition, that governments from outside of the EU would be able to enter the single market and distort competition in this way. So again, to rephrase indeed what Mr. Kotsoumitis said, as long as Chinese initiatives respect European rules, I don't think the EU sees any problem. There's a risk that the Belt and Road will amount to indeed investment into sensitive sectors, that it will endanger fair competition, that China in this way would acquire political leverage over governments. Also within the EU, also in the context of the 16+1 cooperation, not everybody is as keen to cooperate with all that. So yeah, there's a lot of let's say dissidence also within the EU. There's not really a unified front about it, but I do think that fundamentally everybody is open to Chinese investment. That's not the problem. A bit the same with the 5G, but it has to happen according to the rules.
I see. Ms. Jing, let me come back to you. I saw you nod your head when our guest in Athens was explaining why Greece was welcoming to Chinese investment, and in particular, the Port of Piraeus. I want to get your take also on why the Port of Piraeus has been a successful example.
I think I totally agree with our European colleagues there because this project is really, has really demonstrated it's a kind of what we have talked about, the win-win projects. It helped the Chinese goods access to European markets, and also it more important, I think, for Greece is, when it is in difficult situation, no investment coming, Chinese COSCO coming, and brought with the huge investment. That is not only the investment in the port itself, but also it will bring more investment in the surrounding areas and also the jobs. So from this point, and according to the news reports today, there will be more, $600 million will come in for further investment. That will be, built a kind of a chains of, different, sectors there.
Greek Prime Minister was in Shanghai last week participating in the second International Import Expo, and where he delivered a speech and said that Greece is very thankful to China's investment and into cooperation with China at a time when Greece was slowly emerging from a very long, 10-year-long, very painful, very dark economic crisis there. What do you think is the role of China's contribution in helping Greece get back on its feet?
Yes, it's really a kind of a suffering period for Greece. When looking back in 2010, the economy has, suffered a very serious blow from the financial markets. They couldn't get money from the capital markets. And upon the conditions of the so-called bailout, the Greece have to take austerity measures. So at that time, Chinese support a very, pragmatic investment as a very important support at that time. Actually, that is also a kind of show confidence in the country. So that is more important. So from that on, as we have talked a lot about the benefits of the cooperation, more jobs, more growth, and more investments, that's really, really, I think, not only for the prime ministers, but also for the common people to appreciate Chinese contribution in the role. I have ever visited Greece for several times during the debt crisis, and also I visited the port itself. So I could sincerely feel the, acceptance and welcome of Chinese investment there. So.
Mr. Kosimitis, let me come back to you. We were just talking about China's contribution in Greece's economic recovery over there. What is the popular view in Greece about how China's investment, China's vote of confidence, if you will, has helped Greece in recovering its economy?
China's positive contribution to Greece's position in the European Union dates back to 2012. In August 2012, German Chancellor Angela Merkel visited Beijing and had a very crucial discussion with President Xi. And according to very credible sources, President Xi convinced Angela Merkel not to reject Greece out of the Eurozone. This is something that was very crucial in the decision-making process in Germany back then. China wanted a partner, a European partner from Greece that would remain in the Eurozone and the European Union. So that was a very, very positive contribution back then. But also since then, China sees Greece as a crucial partner within the European Union, within the single market and the Eurozone. So not just by vocal diplomacy, but with subtle diplomacy. The Chinese leadership has helped a lot in Greece's relationship within the European Union. And also, it has assisted Greek leadership during those years in not opting for extreme measures in their relationship with the European Union. So we could say that China has been a balancing act between the Eurozone, European Union in Greece, of course, because China wants a European partner out of Greece.
I want to talk to all of you about China and Greece as two civilizations, because it's interesting when a lot of people look at China and Greece, they see two ancient and impactful civilizations representing the East and the West. Mr. Kleppe, let me start with you. What do you think are the similarities and differences between those two civilizations?
Well, they all go back very long. Indeed, Greek civilization is the basis of European civilization, and you could argue that Chinese civilization is also where sort of humanity took root, and China has been leading the world until, according to some historians, around 1500, and then China closed. And now it has opened in the last 40 years with enormous success so far. Similarities, of course, there's big differences as well. China is very centralized at the moment. Greece, in its history, has a history of city-states, of a lot of decentralization. But even if you go back further in history, China was much less centralized. There were many different competing entities, which I think has contributed to its success back then in history.
Mr. Kotsimitis, we now live in a world full of uncertainties and populism, unilateralism when it comes to trade. What can we learn from ancient wisdom when it comes to problem solving?
I think China and the European Union, I wouldn't consider Greece a separate case. I see it as part of the European Union, have a very big responsibility in maintaining multilateralism and free trade around the world. I think also China is gaining wisdom from its European partners in order to become more open and more market-friendly to the outside world. So the Europeans have much also to learn from Chinese energy and Chinese force in promoting merchant international commerce. So everyone has to gain from that, from this cooperation. And it's not a coincidence that just a week ago, before President Xi arrived in Greece, there was a very significant agreement between the European Commission and the Chinese authorities on how to protect specific products, European products in the Chinese markets. So we are seeing the start of a cooperation, of a trade cooperation between European Union and China. And Greece has some leverage now to play also on the European part on how to have a win-win situation about the relationship between China and Europe.
Ms. Jing here in our studio, both China and Greece seem put off by the concept of clash of civilizations, which states that different civilizations on their path forward inevitably have to clash with each other. And here we have China and Greece working very close with each other and collaborate on so many projects. What is your take on this concept of clash of civilizations?
Yes, we have heard a lot about the clash of civilizations. That actually is in line with other theories in international world. For example, the so-called zero-sum game and the offensive realism and the strong power will seek hegemony, etc., etc. But today's world is so highly interconnected that needs the cooperation, the dialogue. So if we still with that kind of mindset, it is impossible for us to jump outside the box to seek the cooperative methods out of the current crisis. You're talking about similarities and differences between the two different civilizations. I could have some words on it. Because even China and European civilizations are different, but on the fundamental level, we are all thinking about how to deal with the relations between the nature and the humankind, and also deal with the economic development and the society development. We have the common goals, that is the common development, sustainable development. So if you look at the concepts today we used, for example, even we are, sometimes arguing with each other about the real meaning of so-called rule of law, human rights, democracy. But actually, what we are different is the ways to reach the goals. We have the same goals, but with different characteristics to need the way to the goals. So that is important. So today, China agrees with different civilizations, cooperated on all those areas. I think is a very pragmatic steps to show the world that there is nonsense of talking about clash of civilizations.
I see. Well, and gentlemen, we don't have a lot of time left. I want to get from both of you your take on the concept of clash of civilizations. Is it still relevant today? Is the example of China and Greece maybe some evidence to suggest that there might not have to be a clash at all? Let me start with you, Mr. Kleppe.
Well, I don't think there can be a clash of civilizations. Civilizations do not clash with each other, otherwise they would not be civilized. When there's a clash, it's always between civilization and barbarism. So indeed, both China and the West are very civilized, and both have opened up to the world a lot in the last half a century. And I think we have to continue that path, and both can actually be partners to also implement this this arrangement of free trade for parts of the world, for example, in the Middle East or in Africa, where you do not have sufficient trade at the moment, and as a result, where you have a lot of conflicts.
Okay, I see. And Mr. Kotsimitis, your take on this?
I totally agree with Peter. There cannot be any clash of civilizations. There can be a clash between civilizations and extremism. And this is something that can be a part of cooperation between Asia, China, and Europe and the Western world. But we need to be very specific on maintaining a level playing field regarding trade. And I think the Chinese leadership begins to realize that it needs Europe and the Western world as partners rather than adversaries. So I think it's more positive. I see the future more positive.
I see. Thank you so much for your input to all three of my guests here. And with that, we come to the end of today's dialogue. I'm Zheng Shi in Beijing. Thank you so much for your company.